The Subcommittee on Research and Technology will come to order. Without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare recesses of the Subcommittee at any time. I'd like to begin by recognizing myself for an opening statement for 5 minutes. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Research and Technology Subcommittee hearing entitled Accelerating Progress, U.S. Surface Transportation Research. The U.S. transportation system underpins the American economy and the movement of goods across our nation. Surface transportation, including our roadways, vehicles, and supporting infrastructure, plays a central role in that success. This infrastructure is critical to American prosperity and touches the daily lives of nearly everyone in our country. It is especially important for Congress to assess the state of research and development in this area as we work to authorize key surface transportation programs. Congress's surface transportation reauthorizations fund infrastructure projects and support R&D initiatives tied to our nation's transportation systems. This subcommittee oversees that research and technology titles within each of these bills, which have helped drive meaningful transportation research at major American universities. We will hear more about this work today from Mr. Winfrey and Dr. Liu. As we look ahead, it is important to consider the full scope of ongoing surface transportation research. Understanding these effects will help inform the committee's work to strengthen infrastructure and advance innovation here in America. For example, Congress must examine vulnerabilities within our transportation system. We must ensure America's transportation systems are not susceptible to interference or attack from geopolitical competitors like the Chinese Communist Party. Imagine, if you will, a scenario in which global positioning system capabilities commonly used in vehicles were disrupted and could not quickly be restored. Emergency services, such as firefighting agencies, could face delays reaching people in need. Beyond emergency response, a GPS disruption would ripple through freight and logistics networks that rely on real-time routing to move goods nationwide. Delivery schedules would falter, supply chains would slow, and costs would rise for businesses and consumers alike. Competitors could also target other connected systems, such as traffic management networks or vehicle-to-infrastructure communications, to cause widespread disruptions without ever physically damaging a single road or bridge. Artificial intelligence will also play a critical role in transforming our transportation system. Having served as co-chair of the bipartisan House AI Task Force last Congress, I have seen firsthand how swiftly American innovation in AI is advancing. These technologies have growing application in transportation, from congestion analysis to intelligent vehicle systems. AI-powered traffic signals can adjust their operations in real time based on actual traffic conditions, easing congestion and improving fuel efficiency. Predictive maintenance tools can analyze sensor data from bridges and roadways to identify problems before they become safety hazards. In the future, vehicle-to-infrastructure communication systems may use AI to coordinate between vehicles and traffic signals, leading to safer intersections and smoother traffic flows. The Advanced Research Projects Agency infrastructure at the Department of Transportation was authorized by Congress in 2021 to support high-risk, high-reward, next-generation transportation technologies. Digital infrastructure, which enables sensitive computing, network, and communication systems, should be a major focus of future ARPA-I investment. Autonomously driven vehicles are one rapidly growing area of innovation, and companies like Tesla and Waymo are making significant advances. Congress should continue evaluating these emerging technologies to support transportation systems that are both cutting edge and safe. Surface transportation research and technology are vital to the strength of our economy. I'd like to thank our witnesses for being here today, and I appreciate their willingness to help the subcommittee explore these crucial areas of U.S. surface transportation research. That concludes my opening statement. I'd like to now recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, Representative Stevens of Michigan, for 5 minutes for her opening statement.
Well, thank you so much, Chairman Obernolte, and thank you to all of our witnesses for being here today. You know, for decades, Michigan has designed, engineered, and manufactured the components that made American vehicles the best in the world. I've spent my career fighting for the workers of Michigan, from helping on the U.S. Auto Rescue under the administration of Barack Obama, an initiative that saved 200,000 Michigan jobs, and of course to the work on this committee helping pass the CHIPS and Science Act to get U.S.-made cars back on the lot after supply chain disruptions. After last summer, I introduced the No Chinese Cars Act, which would stop the flow of Chinese cars and parts into the United States, undermining American autos and threatening Michigan jobs. I will always work to bolster Michigan manufacturing, protect Michigan jobs, and support our best-in-class workforce. That effort starts right here by investing in next-generation technologies. And so this hearing comes at a very pivotal moment for the future of mobility and American competitiveness. The upcoming surface transportation reauthorization is Congress's opportunity to keep the United States and Michigan at the forefront of the global auto industry. At its core, this is a choice. Whose side are we on? Do we export American cars or jobs? The research and development investments supported by this committee will determine whether America stays in the driver's seat or lets our adversaries take the wheel. Let me start with what's working. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act has been a success story. In Michigan, we've seen over $32 million in Federal Highway Administration grants invested in smart intersection and connected vehicle research at the University of Michigan alone. Oakland County, the county that keeps the world on wheels, where 76 of the top 100 global auto part suppliers do business, has leveraged these investments to strengthen our manufacturing ecosystem. And of course, we don't want to get complacent, especially in setting our nation's surface transportation R&D agenda for years to come. The American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials recommends that at a minimum, Congress should maintain funding at the current law's levels, adjusting for inflation. Every dollar we don't invest in American transportation technology and infrastructure is a dollar of advantage we hand to our competitors. Just a few years ago, Chinese vehicles barely registered on the global stage. Today, China is the world's largest auto producer, flooding markets with cheap, largely electric vehicles. Congress cannot ignore these realities or the pressure these Chinese vehicles and components flooding the market put on Michigan manufacturers and auto workers. Despite misguided trade and manufacturing policies, Michigan is still fighting, but our workers need us in their corner. This Science Committee has an important voice in the Surface Transportation Bill reauthorization, and this is an important hearing for us to discuss what investments will keep America at the forefront of the next generation mobility technologies. I'm also particularly pleased to see Dr. Henry Liu, Director of M-City at the University of Michigan here today. Investments like M-City represent exactly the kind of research infrastructure that keeps America competitive, and I look forward to hearing more. And I'm very confident, Mr. Chair, that we can find common ground on investments that keep America competitive, support American workers, and ensure that when the world buys the vehicles of tomorrow, they're designed, engineered, and built in the United States of America, and with my preference in Michigan. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Stevens. I now recognize the Chairman of the full committee, Representative Babin of Texas, for 5 minutes for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, witnesses. Looking forward to your testimony. Good afternoon, Chairman Obernolte. Again, thank you for this hearing. I want to thank these witnesses as well, and we want to see what you all have to say about shaping our surface transportation across the United States. Transportation is the circulatory system of the American economy. Industry and commerce depend upon it, and we must do everything we can to keep that system very strong. When the flow of transportation weakens, roadblocks can prevent America from moving forward as it should. Research and development in surface transportation is especially important. From trucks on our highways that support commerce to safety innovations that protect our families on our roadways, these systems affect Americans every single day. Surface transportation R&D also plays a vital role in safety. Research into crash avoidance systems, better road materials, and vehicle-to-vehicle communication can and does save lives. Every mile we travel can be safer than the last if we invest in smarter vehicles and in our infrastructure. As transportation technologies evolve, We also need a workforce prepared to, to build and maintain them. Another area where American research leadership is critical. Our universities are central to these efforts. This subcommittee oversees the research and technology titles within the surface transportation reauthorizations. These bills enable groundbreaking work in institutions across our country, including the Texas A&M Transportation Institute, or TTI, in my home state of Texas. Director Winfrey, I am eager to learn more about TTI's work on vehicle safety, advanced sensor technologies, and on automated vehicles. I'm also interested in hearing from our witnesses about the innovation in the private sector as American companies continue developing their own autonomous vehicle technologies. Self-driving cars may well be a defining technology of the future. It is remarkable how advances in artificial intelligence are converging with transportation. Understanding these applications across both academia and industry is key to ensuring that the United States leads in surface transportation innovation. At the same time, Congress must examine the full scope of the United States research portfolio to ensure that America remains at the very forefront. We must also ensure that our transportation infrastructure and research enterprise are not vulnerable to interference from foreign adversaries, like the Chinese Communist Party, whether through exploiting weaknesses in GPS networks, targeting connected vehicle software, or racing ahead in next-generation technologies that could transform global markets. These risks are real, and they demand our attention. From highways to railways, surface transportation in the United States is at a crossroads, and the decisions that we make today will define mobility for generations to come. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses about their current state of research in this field, and it is so important and certainly an exciting time for innovation in surface transportation. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Chairman Babin. I now recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Representative Lofgren of California, for 5 minutes for her opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Olbernothy and Ranking Member Stevens, for holding today's hearing. I'd also like to thank our expert panel of witnesses for their testimony. You know, some topics that we cover here in the committee can feel, futuristic or abstract, like quantum computing, but surface transportation affects the lives of everyone who's here. Every person in the country, every day, travels. Each year, the nation's roads, highways, mass transit systems allow Americans to travel billions of miles and ship trillions of dollars in goods and services. But we also need to be clear-eyed about the challenges before us today. Our nation has crumbling infrastructure. Despite the historic investments made during the Biden administration, the American Society of Civil Engineers still gave America a C in its most recent infrastructure report. 39% of major roads in the U.S. are in poor or mediocre condition, and it surely does not help that the Trump administration has unilaterally terminated billions of dollars of commitments made under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act that appear to be entirely motivated by partisanship. The administration's ill-considered tariffs and other actions against our international partners are also contributing to inflation and supply chain disruptions that are increasing construction costs, and they also threaten our state's ability to keep up with growing transportation needs. Our colleagues on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee will debate how best to support our roads, rails, and bridges over the next 5 years, but the Science Committee has a job to look further into the future to the transportation solutions and innovations of tomorrow. It's through research that we will have an opportunity to make our transportation systems safer, cheaper, more efficient, and more environmentally friendly. Researchers are exploring ways to make roads self-healing or methods to recycle pavement to make our roads more environmentally friendly. Research can help us identify and address supply chain shocks, understand how they can affect transportation, and finally, as we modernize our transportation systems, With automation and sustainable technologies, research is going to be critical to understanding the impacts of these technologies on legacy infrastructure. One of the key federal investments in transportation research is the University Transportation Center program. This program supports a consortia of universities that tackle major transportation topics, from smart infrastructure to next-generation GPS and autonomous vehicles. I'm pleased to see 2 UTCs represented on the panel today. Unfortunately, the administration's mishandling of this long-standing and successful program shows yet another instance of manufactured chaos. Last May, Secretary Duffy chose to terminate 7 grants to UTCs, including one at San Jose State University, located in my district, on the basis that the grants, quote, didn't meet the new priorities of the department. Now, this action immediately halted over 40 specific research projects supporting nearly 100 faculty and students across 4 universities. This decision, I think, was completely unfair to the universities who had, after all, competed for the awards. Awardees didn't have a say in the criteria that were set by Congress and implemented by the previous administration. Last summer, Transportation and Infrastructure Ranking Member Larson and I sent the department a letter calling for this decision to be reconsidered. Now, I was heartened by the department's ultimate decision to recompete the terminated awards, but I worry that these arbitrary terminations will shake confidence in DOT as a reliable partner, stall future transportation research programs, and further hamper the next generation of transportation workforce. The most recent surface transportation law, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, expires in September of this year. I'm looking forward to engaging with Dr. Babin, our chairman of the Transportation Research Community, the administration, as well as the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee for the impending reauthorization. I hope that the ideas shared with the committee today can help inform our important work in that effort. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back my remaining 3 seconds.
Well timed. Thank you, Ranking Member Lofgren. We'll now move to witness testimony. Let me introduce our first witness, Ms. Diana Furch-Gottroth. In President Trump's first term, Ms. Furch-Gottroth served as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Research and Technology at the U.S. Department of Transportation, where she directed the $1.2 billion of research portfolio of the department and led the Volpe National Transportation Systems Center and the Transportation Safety Institute. Ms. Furch-Gottroth, you are recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chairman Bobbin, Chairman Obernolte, Ranking Member Lofgren, Ranking Member Stevens. Thanks for allowing me to testify today. American progress has always been the product of American ingenuity. Ever since Henry Ford and the Wright brothers made breakthroughs in transportation technology, and these moved the nation, made us wealthier, enhanced convenience, and improved our competitive advantages. Better transportation gives people a better choice of jobs. We had great jobs numbers today, 172,000 private sector jobs created, a 4.3% unemployment rate. These would not have been possible without our transportation system. Well, America requires transportation to lead technology race in transport, and transportation research is particularly important to safeguard America's transportation system. Safety is a public good, and it's the responsibility of the federal government. Let's take 4 areas: automation, GPS backup, American-made batteries, and public-private partnerships. First, because approximately 40,000 people are killed on the roads every year and millions are injured, the government has an interest in reducing accidents on those roads, in the air, and on railroads. Automation has been shown to lower these accident rates. I want to mention the OSTR program, ARPA-I, which is particularly valuable. DARPA has spent much time seeding the field in the many decades preceding the current boom in AI, and ARPA-I can address road safety and automation of transportation corridors. I just want to mention a few projects that ARPA-I has been working on. new bridge construction technology that will speed the construction of bridges, the DOT Intersection Safety Challenge, which develops technology at intersections that will keep children safe, running an ideas innovation project that has engaged hundreds of innovators across the country to come up with technology to improve transportation infrastructure. Second, foreign actors are increasingly attempting to disrupt the systems that Americans use on the roads, in the air, and on the seas. They want to do this by hacking and spoofing our global positioning system. The federal government provides GPS free of charge, and it has an interest in protecting this GPS and to install backup systems in government vehicles to make sure that they are available if GPS goes out. Turn AI, and I serve on the advisory board of Turn AI, has developed a very inexpensive backup system for GPS that can operate independently of spectrum or visual signals. It works by feeding a sophisticated map in the info system, and this sophisticated map works with the vehicle sensors. It's been tested by DOT, the Army, FedEx is interested because it doesn't want its trucks to be stranded. Amazon is interested because it wants to reduce error rates. It's very important that this type of technology, inexpensive, readily available, be extended to government vehicles also. The Ohio State Carmen Center, which is funded by DOT, has demonstrated that cellular communications infrastructure can be harnessed to deliver the most accurate PNT performance across a wide range of platforms and environments. And recently, in the latest bill, Congress appropriated $5 million for the Department of Transportation to deploy backup positioning, navigation, and timing services. This is in the FY 2026 Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Appropriations Bill that was passed by the Senate. Third, Chinese spying from electronic components and batteries is very damaging to the United States, and it's very important that we have US-made batteries in order to address this and to make sure that our system is not vulnerable. Just today, it was announced that DOT is requiring 100% made in the United States electric battery chargers, and electric batteries are available made in the United States, made from lithium in North Carolina, processed in the United States at the same cost as Chinese batteries. And Chinese battery chargers would be very damaging because they would be spying on people who charge up their vehicles. It's very important that we have that we reduce spying by Chinese on American motorists. Fourth, public-private partnerships are vital to replace and maintain infrastructure. And we heard about the crumbling infrastructure. We need to make sure that the private sector has an opportunity to do this. One of the ways is tolling, and the Federal Communications Commission shouldn't be allowed to give away part of the 900 megahertz band of spectrum, which will mean that these toll systems will no longer work, and we won't be able to have private-public partnerships in order to build the roads that we need to and maintain the ones that we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Furst-Gothroth. We'll move to our next witness now, the Honorable Greg Winfrey, the Agency Director of the Texas A&M Transportation Institute. In this role, he leads one of the largest and most comprehensive higher education-affiliated transportation research institutes in the United States. He represents TTI within the Texas A&M University system, reporting to the Vice Chancellor for Engineering, and serves as the Institute's liaison to the Texas Legislature. He also serves as an adjunct professor at the Texas A&M School of Law. Before joining TTI, Mr. Winfrey spent nearly 7 years at the U.S. Department of Transportation, most recently as Assistant Secretary of Transportation overseeing the department's research and technology programs. Mr. Winfrey, you are recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Thank you so much, Chairman Obernolte. Greeting Ranking Member Stevens, Chairman Babin, Ranking Member Lofgren, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you so much for inviting me to testify about the importance of federal surface transportation research programs. Again, my name is Greg Winfrey, and I'm the Agency Director of the Texas A&M Transportation Institute, or TTI. Prior to joining TTI in 2016, as you've heard, I served as the Assistant Secretary for Research and Technology at USDOT. Established in 1950 and a member of the Texas A&M University system, TTI is a state agency and the largest and most comprehensive university-affiliated transportation research center in the United States. Throughout our 75-year history, TTI has addressed complex transportation challenges and has conducted work in all 50 states and more than 54 countries. As this committee well knows, technology is changing at an incredible rate. Innovations that would once take decades are now happening daily. Much of this innovation is coming out of research institutions like TTI, and continued investment in transportation research is vital to securing U.S. dominance in transportation and infrastructure. We cannot allow ourselves to fall behind our adversaries, which I fear may already be happening at a quickening pace. TTI values its longstanding collaborative relationship with USDOT. Our partnership is a notable example of the force multiplier role that research institutions can serve for USDOT and its state and local DOT partners. Research institutions are major participants in USDOT-sponsored research, including the cooperative research programs managed by the Transportation Research Board. The research community also supports many other USDOT activities, including the ITS Joint Program Office, the SMART Grant Program, and ARPA-I. The UTC program is of particular importance. The UTCs move ideas from research to reality, assisting USDOT in addressing transportation's biggest challenges and delivering measurable impacts for communities, agencies, and industry. The UTCs have been at their most successful when centers have the freedom to take the priorities set forth by Congress and USDOT and identify the research areas that will drive innovation. UTC should be used as implementation partners and force multipliers, extending USDOT's capacity to work directly with states on deployment. Now, we appreciate the support Congress has given to the UTC program. As you work on the next surface transportation bill, reauthorization of the UTC program will ensure that USDOT continues to be able to harness the power and creativity of university research to address our nation's most pressing transportation challenges. Specifically, Congress should authorize the UTC program at not less than $100 million per year. In addition to the UTC program, TTI has identified the following critical research areas that are deserving of federal attention and investment. Transportation intelligence. A resilient transportation system requires reliable, nationwide intelligence so USDOT and state agencies can plan and respond effectively. But today our data is fragmented, with no unified access across state lines. That's why TTI is working in partnership with Senator Cornyn and the University of Maryland to propose a national infrastructure intelligence tool through the Congestion Mitigation Act. Emerging technology. The transportation sector is rapidly transforming and is evolving from siloed individual nodes to digital infrastructure connecting modes and technology. Research institutions are key partners in accelerating the deployment of innovative digital technologies, shared data, and coordinated operations to transform and modernize major U.S. transportation corridors. Dedicated funding in the next surface transportation reauthorization bill for technology deployment would serve to enhance these efforts. The department's recently released digital infrastructure RFI is also a welcome step. Transportation safety. The United States has yet to significantly reduce transportation-related fatalities in recent years, despite implementing several new technologies and approaches. Given the continuing alarming trends in fatalities and injuries, it is clear there is a need for a more universal, beneficial, and proactive approach to safety planning, deployment, and assessment at the state, regional, and national levels. On behalf of the 700 dedicated professionals at TTI, thank you for your support for federal surface transportation research programs. I would be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Winfrey. Our final witness is Dr. Henry Liu, the Bruce Greenshields Collegiate Professor of Engineering at the University of Michigan, where he serves as Director of the University of Michigan Transportation Research Institute, MCITY, and the U.S. DOT-funded Center for the Connected and Automated Transportation. His research bridges traffic systems, vehicle automation, and artificial intelligence with a focus on real-world deployment. He currently serves as managing editor of the Journal of Intelligent Transportation Systems. Dr. Liu, you are recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairman Obanati, Ranking Member Stevens, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Henry Liu. I'm a professor at the University of Michigan, and I serve as the director of University of Michigan Transportation Research Institute, which include MCity and the US DOT-funded Center for Connected Automated Transportation. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you to discuss how the US can accelerate progress in surface transportation research. My remarks focus on two priority areas. The first priority area is to establish a rigorous national framework for autonomous vehicle safety testing and evaluation. It's needed because autonomous driving systems are moving from limited pilot towards broader deployment, and society needs a credible answer to a basic question: how do we know a system is safe enough to scale? Without a rigorous, unbiased evaluation framework, we face two unacceptable outcomes: either premature deployment based on incomplete evidence that undermines public trust, or delayed adoption of a potentially life-saving technology because regulators, insurers, and communities lack a principled basis for confidence. But autonomous vehicle safety testing is difficult not only because crashes are rare and operational field is effectively open-ended, but also because modern AVs are AI-driven and partially black box. Performance can vary sharply with small changes in context. A learning-based component can fail in non-intuitive ways, often described as hallucinations. Because of these fundamentals, a national AV evaluation framework cannot be created by policy alone. It requires sustained research to make safety evidence rigorous and scalable, and to enable independent assessment. At MCity, through an NSF-funded MCity 2.0 effort, we have developed a behavior safety assessment program with two complementary components. Basic behavior competency testing uses scenario libraries to establish behavioral flaw analog to human licensing. The driving intelligence test provides statistical evaluation in naturalistic and adversarial environment to uncover unknown unsafe behaviors and estimate accident rate with confidence bound. It is important to note this is still a developing framework, but it offers a practical blueprint for third-party performance-based assessment. The second priority is to advance AI-based digital road infrastructure so agencies can improve safety and mobility do more with less capabilities. The opportunity is to leverage AI to turn the vast amount of data agencies own into actionable operational intelligence. Two examples illustrate what this looks like in practice. The first example is to use anonymized vehicle trajectory data to optimize traffic signal timing plans without any new sensors. At Armtree, we demonstrate this with significant reduction in delays and stops, and we are scaling the system with pilot in Oakland County, Michigan, with a US DOT-funded SMART Phase 1 grant. The second example is to leverage AI to proactively safe monitor with existing cameras. Because crashes are rare, so it takes a long time to collect crash data for safety management. At Armtree, we leverage AI and existing cameras to compute conflict indicators, allowing agencies to detect crash risk and evaluate countermeasures months or years before crash statistics would show a change. The system is being deployed at more than 50 intersections in the city of Ann Arbor in Michigan. To accelerate progress in these two priority areas, I have the following recommended actions for Congress to consider. First, to establish a dedicated federal program to advance the science of autonomous vehicle evaluation. Second, to build shared research-accessible data and compute infrastructure, including privacy-preserving repository and dedicated compute resources. Third, to provide stable long-term support for testbed and living labs And last but not least, to reauthorize and modernize the University Transportation Centers program as the backbone of the research to workforce to deployment pipeline. With these steps, the United States can lead in transportation safety, infrastructure modernization, and the responsible deployment of AI-enabled mobility grounded in rigorous evidence and measurable public benefit. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Liu. We will now move to questions from members of the subcommittee. I will begin by recognizing myself for 5 minutes for questions. Ms. Fritz-Gothroth, I would like to start with you. One of the common frustrations that I hear, not only from members of Congress, but from members of the research community, is that quite often we will fund really promising technology pilot programs that are successful, but then get stuck and never achieve nationwide deployment. So I'm curious about your tenure at the DOT and your experience with overcoming these structural barriers to get research from the lab out into the real world. And specifically, I'm interested in the specific steps that we can take in Congress during this reauthorization to strengthen that process, because obviously a program that never advances beyond the pilot program is not one that most of our constituents are going to realize the benefits from.
So part of the problem that I saw when I was Deputy Assistant Secretary for Research and Technology was a big fight over connected vehicles. The industry had developed dedicated short-range communications, and then some of the spectrum was taken away by another part of the government and reallocated so that that technology couldn't be used. And then that other agency, the Federal Communications Commission, ended up requiring a second technology called cellular V2X. So it was a question of two different departments working in contradictory directions. And we can see this happening again with the Federal Communications Commission inquiry consideration of repurposing the 900 megahertz band, giving it to a particular company called NextNav to ostensibly to use it for GPS backup, but this company already provides GPS backup. You can already see on the website, and that would disrupt the toll collectors. And again, that's a very important transportation resource because that's used for public-private partnerships. If you want to build a new, for example, the new Indiana Toll Road or other kinds of new bridges, tolls are very important. So those are the kinds of arguments that kind of need to be straightened out within the executive branch. In terms of certain technologies not working out, then it's possible that just like there's a dry hole in an oil company or a pharmaceutical company invests in some drug that then doesn't work, it's very important to have the investments. You can't be assured that 100% of them work. Then you're just going to take very low-risk activities, and you want to look at basically high-risk activities.
Right, of course. And no one pretends that those are bad investments because, as you point out, we need to sort for the few things that are going to be really super successful. We've got to make a wide variety of different investments, but certainly frustrated when the conditions change, as you've outlined. Mr. Winfrey, a similar question for you. I was interested in your written testimony that you noted federal research dollars go furthest when the goal is to deploy technology on real roads, not just produce a study, which I think is the goal of most of these investment dollars. You also emphasize that sometimes our biggest challenge is not actually generating good ideas, but getting those ideas tested, standardized, and adopted by state departments of transportation. So can you share with us an example where that transition worked well and maybe one that it fell short, and identify the factors that made the difference?
Absolutely, and it's a mix of the question you asked previously and an answer to the question you just posed, so thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. I would call it stair steps to success. Pilot programs are terrific. When I was Assistant Secretary, we were pleased and thrilled to be able to grant to the University of Michigan Transportation Institute the Connected Vehicle Safety Pilot. And that proved out technologies that Ms. Furchtgott-Roth is talking about with respect to vehicles having the ability to communicate in real time and with either other vehicles or with infrastructure. That technology was proven, but because of the timetables, technology development in the transportation space is on a much longer time frame than what you find from Silicon Valley. And you can put a new cell phone out and have it crash and no one dies. You can't put a transportation technology out and have and be able to tolerate those kinds of endpoints. So it needs to be absolutely safe before it's introduced into the traveling public. So that's certainly one frame of reference for understanding to better execute these technologies to get them into the communities and before the American driving and traveling public, but also it's a funding issue. Funding at the federal level dictates federal leadership. There is a need for guidance from US DOT with respect to how the states operate, because the funds that come from the federal government trickle down to the states for execution. And without an adequate game plan and directive from the feds, you wind up with what we have now with 50-state cacophony with folks that don't know what to do. So yes, pilot programs are good. Get those in place and then have a strategy for nationwide deployment. I think a good instance of where that is showing and bearing some fruit now is with the VitaX deployment program through US DOT that TTI is working on in Houston, but Arizona and Utah are both partnered in that regard. This is a deployment program. This isn't a pilot. This is an actual deployment that will have improve out the technology for nationwide deployment, so it can be done.
Right. Well, thank you very much for the insights. So my time has expired. I'll now recognize Ranking Member Stevens for her 5 minutes for her questions.
Okay, thank you. The University Transportation Center's program is a competitive grant program that supports mid to long-term surface transportation research, as our ranking member mentioned. And of course, we've been seeing grants get canceled through UTC awards and schedule expirations just coming into effect. And so, Mr. Winfrey and Dr. Liu, can you describe the impacts of these cancellations on the broader community? Do actions like these undermine confidence in the stability and predictability of federal research programs?
Ranking Member Stevens, like you just mentioned, that these grants are competitively bidded, and so it's certainly a surprise for us that we see that some of the programs has been canceled and terminated, and then we are in the process of rebidding. In some of these are rebidding these programs, and so I do think that this will create some uncertainty in transportation research, and this will impact not only the research project, but also the faculty and students also involved in these projects. And so this is certainly a shock to the transportation enterprise in the U.S.
And Mr. Winfrey, if these program cancellations were to happen or to occur at your respective institution, what would be the immediate impacts?
To echo what Dr. Liu said, certainly faculty and students, but let's not forget, these are consortia, and the UTC program is something I hold dear. I was the bureaucrat that had to take it to a fully competitive program that we have now, so I'm very beholden to the UTC program. But what I'm saying is it's a consortium, so these programs have 1 to sometimes 10 or 11 universities involved. So it's not just the name and lead school that suffers. There are downstream effects, and the intent was to share these resource dollars across a wider area. So it's regional or even greater in its impact. So it can be devastating.
Well, you have a lot to be proud of with that program, and also thank you for your incredible testimony written and delivered. And, you know, one of the biggest challenges confronting Congress in the upcoming surface transportation reauthorization is how best to balance safety and innovation with the deployment of autonomous vehicles. While we are not as focused on the regulatory challenges on this committee, there are still critical research and testing that needs to be done to improve the safety and to understand the impact of such a transition. And Dr. Liu, in 2024, your team at M-City released the M-City Digital Twin, which I'm a fan of the Digital Twin, to support the development and testing of autonomous and connected vehicle software. Unlike other platforms, this Digital Twin is an open source project. So can you just describe for us here the M-City Digital Twin and explain how tools like this can advance mobility research?
Sure, that's a great question. So M-City Digital Twin was built as part of the NSF-supported national M-City 2.0 project. In that project, we have a M-City physical infrastructure, and then with that digital twin, we couple the physical infrastructure with the digital infrastructure, and now we can open up M-City for remote access to this mixed reality test bed. And this is particularly important. We are at Michigan, we are fortunate enough, we have a test bed. And one of the things I specify in my testimony is that the transportation research community likes a test bed to test out their algorithms and so that they can specify the parameters and before they deploy it in the real world. And so this digital twin of this M-City is particularly important that it not only enables researchers to test out their algorithm before they even test in the M-City physical infrastructure, but also because it's open source, they can incorporate this into their algorithms and do some specification with it. And it's open sourced, so it's not only to academic community, but it's also to the industry as well. And so you have seen multiple, a number of users are using these digital twins. And we also further develop these digital twins, not only constrained at M-City, but now we are developing a city-scale digital twin for the city of Ann Arbor. We're also working with San Francisco County Transportation Authority to build a much larger scale digital twin so that we can test out autonomous vehicles in terms of particularly to explore their unknown unsafe behaviors and also to estimate the accident rates they will be occurring when they being deployed in large scale.
Well, keep up the great work. And with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. I now recognize my colleague from California, Mr. Fong, for 5 minutes for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the testimony. I wanted to focus on my questions to you, Mrs. Diana Furchtgott-Roth. I certainly am bullish when it comes to autonomous technology, especially when it comes to transportation. I've introduced the America Drives Act to try to create a national framework to allow the deployment safely of this technology. I was wanting to get from your expertise and your experience, what should we be doing now to advance autonomous technology, especially when it comes to cars and trucks?
Thanks for that excellent question. Autonomous driving can go so very, very far to reduce accidents. I was really happy to have my first ride in a Waymo taxi when I was in Phoenix a few months ago. It was really a transformative experience. It went slower than I would have gone, very safe. And I know that there are headlines whenever there's an accident with an autonomous vehicle, but there are far fewer than there are on the regular vehicles on the road, vehicles with drivers in them. So I think it's very important that the federal government set overall performance standards, but then let different states and cities roll out these autonomous vehicles as they see fit. And when I was Deputy Assistant Secretary for Research and Technology, I would travel the country, and people in Greenville would say, why aren't you allowing me to use my autonomous shuttle? People in Tampa would say, why aren't you allowing me to use my autonomous shuttle? So I think it's very important to get this technology out, point one. Point two, if you have autonomous trucking, if you have autonomous trucks, you need a whole corridor across the United States to do so. So I think it's very important to have corridors where autonomous trucks can go so that they don't find they get to, for example, Texas, then they can't use the autonomous technology, then they can use it after they go through Texas. So something like I-10, having an autonomous corridor there, or a couple of other corridors would be very helpful also.
I couldn't agree with you more. I do invite you to maybe take a ride on Aurora's or Kodiak's autonomous trucks. I've had the same experience going in Texas, and of course interstate commerce. We can't have 50 different rules across the country, especially when we're trying to get products from point A to point B, especially when it comes to the supply chain. In terms of legislative barriers, are there specific legislative barriers that you've seen in your research that need to be addressed to help propel this technology forward? You've kind of outlined, kind of putting a framework, but do you have any specific legislative ideas that you think need to be, in the short term need to be addressed, and then in the long term, as well?
I don't have them right now, but I would be happy to get back to you with a list of those proposed legislative changes. And I just want to add that in terms of our workforce, we see that that our workforce is not necessarily expanding as fast as it used to be. We have shortages of truck drivers. I think one of the barriers to autonomous technology, not just in the road area, but also in ports, has been the feeling that workers will be disenfranchised. But with autonomous technology, productivity can be increased, people can be paid more, and all technology has been leading to an expansion of employment rather than a contraction.
Absolutely. I want to offer the other two panelists to chime in as well. In terms of what can we do to advance autonomous technology? Are there any specific legislative barriers that you've seen in your research? Certainly welcome your expertise to both of you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fong, and I'll be brief. Again, it's a lack of federal leadership with respect to harmonizing the 50 states. We've got a 50-state cacophony right now with different rules. However, I'm proud to say that the great state of Texas is the leader with respect to self-driving technologies with Aurora, Gatic, and others on our roadways. But Ms. Frischgott-Roth is exactly right. If we're going to get commerce from California to Florida on I-10 or I-40 or any of the other interstates, we need to be able to have a seamless connectivity between the states. Thank you.
So one of the things I want to add is there's various programs in the federal, some of the federal project, but safety testing and the evaluation of autonomous vehicles is scattered around. There's no central place that the federal program support safety testing and evaluation. I want to mention that autonomous vehicle safety testing and evaluation, it is a difficult problem. It's not easy. There's no consensus how do we test these vehicles in terms of their safety performance. And so, now when something happened with these autonomous vehicle developers, and this blame goes to the company. And so I think there's a need for the federal to establish a federal program to really explore the science behind autonomous vehicle safety testing, and then to provide some sort of framework, how do we evaluate, and also to investigate how safe is it safe enough, right? So in terms of this technology.
Well, my time has run out, but I appreciate the leadership of Texas. That's where I rode and saw these technologies in real time firsthand. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. We'll go next to the representative from Delaware, Ms. McBride. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Stevens for hosting this hearing today, and good afternoon to our witnesses. Thank you so much for taking the time to come before us today to share your expertise and your knowledge. This committee plays a unique role in moving forward legislation that advances research and development efforts for surface transportation. As we heard earlier, university transportation centers are authorized and funded to research and develop recommendations that make our roads and infrastructure better and safer for Americans. I am proud that the University of Delaware, in the greatest state in the history of the Union, Delaware, plays an important role. I heard some laughter there. Plays an important role in this effort as one of only 7 universities that form the Smarter Center. After the tragic collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in 2024, the Smarter Center mobilized quickly to study the impact of the collapse, to develop recommendations to help mitigate the impact, and to carry out long-term research to learn about the lasting consequences of the tragedy. As a member of the Smarter Center, the University of Delaware conducts research that is community-based, folding in workforce development, multimodal transit options, urban areas, food access, emerging technologies, and more, while involving industry partners, government agencies, and more. This research is not only timely, but crucial to helping us understand how we can make wise investments to make our infrastructure work better for us tomorrow. Congress and the administration should continue to support this important work rather than pulling the rug out from under our researchers and universities that are working to advance our understanding and inform our decision-making. I'd like to start with Dr. Liu. In your experience as a director of a university transportation center, could you speak more to how you would characterize the impact that sustained federal funding has on transportation research through UTCs, and how does this work help state and local governments make smarter and more cost-effective decisions?
Yes, I want to agree with my colleague Greg Winfrey that these university transportation centers, they are consortiums. So at the Center for Connected Automated Transportation, our Region 5 UTC, we have 9 universities within the consortium. And so it's not only just the lead university, but also a number of consortium members. The second thing I want to emphasize is these UTCs not only conduct research and make impact in terms of our policy and practice, but also this is an important consortium to educate our next generation workforce. And so, so at UTC, I want to emphasize these are research, workforce, and impact. It's not only just the research. So it carries the responsibility to educate our next generation workforce.
Great, thank you very much. And Assistant Secretary Winfrey, we just heard a little bit about Waymos. I haven't had the chance to ride in one yet. But moving back and sort of talking more broadly about emerging technologies, could you speak about the role UTCs have played in studying emerging technologies in transportation to help improve safety and resilience of our transportation systems? And what role do UTCs play in facilitating the mass deployment of these technologies in a timely and safe manner?
That's a great question. Thank you so much. A good way to think about it is something that we're doing at Texas A&M, and it's called the Transportation Technology Innovation Accelerator. If you look at state DOTs around the country, they're inundated with brilliant ideas that, hey, only for $1 million we can solve all your problems. State DOTs don't have the depth of bench to do the research and really invest the time in figuring out what's wheat and what's chaff, what's real and what's Memorex. That's where university transportation centers can play a huge role by bringing those technologies into a space that's got controlled access, that's got proving grounds, that's got the depth of bench as a force multiplier for the state DOT personnel to test out those technologies and then give them the Consumer Reports seal of approval as to whether or not it will work in their system, or to be objective and tell them whether or not it's not going to work and it's not worth the investment. So that is a tremendous role that universities can play starting tomorrow with respect to working with state DOTs in partnership to ensure that the best technologies get into the transportation system to start saving lives now.
Thank you. Yeah, that scalability of expertise is a real benefit for our state and local governments in particular. Thank you very much. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. We'll hear next from the gentlewoman from Maryland, Ms. McLean Delaney. You're recognized for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you to our chair and to our ranking member, and thanks to our witnesses here today. I've been watching this and very, very interested in hearing your testimony. So I represent Maryland's 6th congressional district, which stretches from the suburbs of Washington, D.C. to the West Virginia and Pennsylvania borders. I often call it the microcosm of America because it's diversity in geography from rural to suburban to urban. But given our proximity to the capital, many of my constituents commute far distances to DC or across our wide, diverse geographic district. Surface transportation is about connectivity, from bridges to highways and beyond. And for many, that means public transit to get to work, take kids to school, or reach the grocery store. So in Montgomery County, which is very close to DC, we've seen what's possible when we put affordability first. Our county pioneered a fare-free ride-on bus system, and it's made a real difference in higher ridership, lower transportation costs for families, and better access. And sadly, that stands in stark contrast to the uncertainty coming from this administration and the Department of Transportation on proposed attacks on our free fare transit programs. But transit isn't just about accessibility, it's about affordability and not having to pay hundreds of dollars a month for car insurance or transportation instead of affordable daycare or other costs. But research in this innovation and greater access is what I'm really key to me, and that brings me today to focus on strengthening our surface transportation research. We have a real opportunity here, and I'm looking forward to hearing about a couple of things with innovation, AI, new tech, because throughout my career in nonprofit, for-profit, and government, I focused on the collection of data and how it's used and who has access to it, particularly when it comes to agencies and government data and how it's shared or monitored or safeguarded from third parties. So, Mr. Winfrey, I heard that the proprietary vendor formats make it harder to share data and comply with federal reporting. Can you talk about how federal investment in the Transit Integrated Data Exchange specification and the Transit Operational Data Standards reduce burden, improve interoperability across systems, and lower costs for agencies and competitors?
Thank you so much for your question, Ms. Delaney. That is extraordinarily complicated and complex, and I'm a lawyer. So
am I.
Yeah, and I was a Venable lawyer. I'll be happy to get any information you need from our experts, but I will tell you from a 30,000-foot view, the data challenges are tremendous. As I mentioned to Representative Fong, in the state of Texas, we've got automated vehicles on our roadways right now, but it's proprietary information, and the innovators that are operating on the roadways have no obligation to share data with us, with TxDOT, with our state troopers, or with our Department of Motor Vehicles. So that's a black box, and we don't know what's going on inside.
You think that's a problem?
That's a huge, well, it's an issue and an opportunity that we're missing. Safety of operation is where they need to be inch perfect with respect to ensuring that these technologies become implementable on a wide scale. And that trickles down to the transit level. We are huge supporters of public transit at the Texas A&M Transportation Institute. The funding models are upside down, we believe, because it's all about ensuring that Americans can get from point A to point B. We need to have availability of choice. We're not obviously averse to that, but ensuring that those with the least amount of means have the ability to get to those centers, whether it's food deserts that they can relieve themselves from, or employment centers. We need to be facilitating that.
Thank you, and I'll follow up with you on that. Dr. Liu, your team released the M-City Digital Twin as an open source project as a public good, but many competing digital twin platforms are proprietary. If a state DOT builds out its AI traffic management around this, it could be blocked in a single vendor ecosystem. What role should federally funded research play in ensuring digital infrastructure remains interoperable and publicly accountable?
Thank you for that question. I think the open source digital twin is particularly important, and everybody understand the digital twin itself is it takes a long time to build, but it's critical to evaluate different type of technologies and before they can be deployed on our railroad, on the roadways. And so with the open source digital twin, then this will open up the opportunity for not only for academic researchers, but also for private companies to really utilize this resource to evaluate their algorithms and things like that. And one of the other things I want to mention, MCD has a physical infrastructure as well, right? So it's not only just the digital twin, it also has the physical infrastructure, so it can help the researchers to look at also how the fidelity of the digital twin and also the result from this evaluation. So having this such testbed not only include the physical infrastructure, but also the digital infrastructure is particularly important for the research and technology development.
Excellent. Dr. Liu, I'll follow up with some questions for the record, but I thank you and I yield back.
Thank you.
Gentlewoman yields back. We'll hear next from the gentleman from Illinois. Mr. Foster, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and our witnesses. Just a quick question on the last point. Are these being integrated into the, what is the big project, the Genesis project, where there's an attempt led by the Department of Energy to get all of the federally accessible databases in one standard to access way?
No, this is not right now. This project in particular related with MCD Digital Twin was supported by National Science Foundation, the MCD 2.0 project.
Okay, which is also at least intended to be incorporated. It strikes me this is a generally useful data set for a number of purposes, and
I certainly agree.
Yeah. Okay. One thing everyone's been worried about for a while is cybersecurity in all of these. There was, I guess, probably 10 years ago where Tesla, one of the Chinese, I think was it Tencent or Alibaba, some researchers there hacked a Tesla and then found out they could do anything you wanted, including potentially kill the occupant or other fun stuff. And so Tesla rapidly made it so it could not be jailbroken. Sort of the difference between a Windows machine and an iOS machine. And these, and the problem that we have is that we have this wonderful agency, NIST, that defines all the standards for supply chain security and cybersecurity and everything else, but they don't call balls and strikes on specific projects. And it struck me for a while that that's an agency we need. We need to have someone who actually is a regulatory agency, says, okay, we look at the NIST standards, we look at what you're doing, your product does not qualify, and you can't go on the road, or whatever it is. We're going to need, it's wider than just transportation. This is an issue for like iPhone. If we start using our iPhones for high-valued financial transactions, and then all of a sudden you find out the key storage is not secure in your iPhone, then that can discredit, the whole operation and cost people billions of dollars. So, what's the best thinking on how we get the cybersecurity that we will need, and the supply chain security and the chips and everything that goes with that, so that we don't have the science fiction disaster of all the robots turning against us, or them being used for assassination, all the stuff that's been written about for decades. So what's the status of trying to, and Amy, you want to take a swing at that?
Well, I think at the very least, we need to make sure that we have batteries that are made in the USA, that we don't have Chinese EVs or Chinese vehicles that can be hacked. Because just as if you buy a GM car and you subscribe to OnStar and it says, if this car is stolen, let us know, we can disable it or stop it. China owns...
Yeah, they have a kill switch. I mean, there are all sorts of bad things
exactly.
you can
do. So we
do
need to
if
make
you
sure
can.
that those are kept out, and that the Chinese batteries don't have the spine components. I would say.
Okay,
that's
but
step number
what
one.
agency is the one that says, okay, this model is all right because we trust country X, and this one is not okay because we don't trust country Y, or if they were less sloppy, and it could be an American company that's just being sloppy, and so it struck me that we actually need an enforcement arm, not just NIST to define best practices. Is there been any serious discussion of standing up such an agency to you know, the military has to face this for all kinds of secure systems, and sort of the best they have is Sandia National Labs as sort of the unofficial expert being used for military systems, but, you know, there's a lot more civilian than military electronics out there.
Unfortunately, I don't have a perfect answer. It's scattered and diffuse. I recall the Department of Commerce entertaining conversations about this. You mentioned the iPhone. It's largely not widely known that your iPhone can contact the Russian GPS system, GLONASS, right? So it's cascading effects, and it's difficult to pinpoint it to any one particular technology or any one particular arena. So there's going to need to be a whole-of-government approach that sits down and analyzes and then deputizes the proper, or creates the proper stand-up organization to address this. But I recall the Department of Commerce tackling this or trying to tackle this about a dozen years ago.
Yeah, and this is clearly something where the states do not have the capacity to do this. It's not even clear that we as a nation have the capacity to look at every piece of consumer electronics that could potentially harm someone, and then, you know, and then somehow have some pretty highly paid, very expert people look at the software, the firmware, the supply chain history of the silicon and everything that will, because, you know, the bad guys are already thinking of exploiting this.
Congressman, I'm not a policy expert, but I can comment on some of the technology development related with cybersecurity. I think cybersecurity, in many cases, is being considered as an add-on afterwards, afterthoughts. But research is really needed to really incorporate security by design, and so that as part of this system design, that you incorporate security consideration into the specification, so that these are automatically has it.
Yeah. And, you know,
And it has to have the power of Congress, because if one agency makes a regulation, say that we're not going to have Chinese EVs, then in another administration that can be rolled back. But if Congress codifies and makes into a law, if all of you decide that this is important, you pass a law, then it can't just ping pong backwards and forwards between administrations.
yeah, from a foreign point of view, I'm worried more about, it costs a lot to do a good job of cybersecurity, and that's anyway. Well, thank you, and yield back.
The gentleman yields back. That concludes questions from the subcommittee. I'd like to thank the witnesses for all of your valuable testimony and all of our members for their pertinent questions. The record will remain open for 10 days for additional comments and written questions from members. This hearing is now adjourned.